Okay, today is November 20th, the year 2001. I'm Dr. Dave Thompson here at the Palm Springs Air Museum with Don Sutherland. Don was a ball turret gunner in World War II, and then in Korea he was called into the U.S. Army. He was a combat MP, ended up fighting with the infantry. So nice to have you here, Don.
Thank you.
Tell me, when and where were you born?
Glendale, California.
And when was that?
July 6, 28.
That's 1928. What did your dad do?
My dad was a Navy career man.
Oh, really? Oh. When did he join the Navy?
In World War I.
Was he? Did he? Oh. What did he do in World War I?
Oh, he got a bullet in his back. He died with a bullet in his back.
Oh, really?
And he saw action in World War I, but in World War II, because of his age, he was just more of a desk jockey.
Uh-huh. How did he get wounded in World War I?
He never elaborated too much on that.
Was he on a ship? Or?
Yeah, he was on a ship.
Was he like in the North Atlantic somewhere, or do you know where he was?
I don't know exactly where he was at. He never talked much about it. The only thing I do know is that he had a bullet still in his back that they never took out because it wasn't necessary. So when he passed away, he still had that bullet in his back.
Oh, okay. Do you know what kind of ship he was on?
No.
Okay. So, and where did he grow up? Where was he?
He grew up here in California.
In California,
yeah.
Also?
Yeah. He was born in Canada, and then became a U.S. citizen. And basically, he and his dad both came from Canada.
Oh, okay.
And then they came to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
He lived in Los Angeles up on top of what they call it, Nob Hill, I think it is, which is torn down now, and there's high-rises there now, but he used to take the Angel's flight every once in a while.
What's that? What was that?
It's that little cable car that goes up and down from Nob Hill. They just recently restored that again, so I guess people can just take it as a joyride.
And your mom, or what was your dad's name?
John Dean Sutherland.
And
he went by Jack.
Oh, okay. And what was your mom's name, her maiden name?
Van Pelt.
P-E-L-T. What was her first name?
Ruth.
And where did they, when did they get married, or where did they meet?
They met in Los Angeles, and they got married in 25.
And did your mom, well, your dad obviously traveled around a lot in the Navy then.
Yes.
Did your mom, what did she do before she got married? Was she working anywhere? Or?
She was working as a stenographer, shorthand typist.
What, well, it's, you were born in Glendale.
Yeah.
Well, tell me, obviously you probably moved around somewhat too. Tell me some of the places that you lived.
Well, I basically was in L.A. My dad was still in the Navy, and I was still living in L.A. And then in 1937, the Navy Department transferred my dad over to Hawaii. And as a result, I saw Pearl Harbor bombed with my own eyes. I was living in Aiea, which is up on the side of the hill, which had a panoramic view of Pearl Harbor. And my dad was home that Sunday morning, and every time something would blow up, my dad just kept saying, "Oh my God, oh my God." He just sounded like a broken record.
What did you think at the time? You were 12 years
Well,
old?
I was 13.
13.
And I knew that things were wrong. Of course, they're all during the year 1941. There was a lot of tension between Japan and this country. So we knew that war was inevitable.
And you were aware of that too?
Right, right. I was aware of it. And I'll never, before I go into the history a little bit more, I just want to say that on the attack of Pearl Harbor, on the second wave that came over, one jet plane came over low in the house. He had the canopy back, and he was leaning out over the edge of the plane, and he waved down at me with his big grinning teeth. And like a silly 13-year-old, I stood there and I waved back at him, even though I could see the big red meatball in his wing. I was too dumb to realize the difference. And but now going into my family's history,
Okay, let me back up just a second. Did you see the movie Pearl Harbor?
Oh yes.
Was it similar to that? I mean, at all?
No,
I mean,
Tora was much more authentic.
No, I'm talking not the whole movie itself, but I mean, when you saw him coming over that big hill and then going down and going through the canyons and stuff like that. I mean, the hill you're telling me about that you lived on sounds similar to what you saw.
They came over the hills from the north side of the island, and it's actually mountains. Yeah. And then they came down and they started their attack right on Pearl Harbor. As far as flying in between the ships like the movie showed, no.
No, I didn't. So, but nevertheless, I mean, I think in that movie too, I think there were some kids looking up at him or something.
Well,
like that.
I don't know if that's true or not, but in Tora, where they showed the people out there picking pineapples Sunday morning, and then the planes flew over, that was true.
Oh,
And also my old car was supposed to be in that movie, but it didn't turn out to be that way. I had that 41 Ford, and that was over there. And when before they started filming Tora, one day I had the car parked down in Waikiki, and it was in a residential section. And when I was going back to my car, this man was sitting, or sort of leaning against the front fender, and I wondered, gee, did I park in somebody's driveway? I wonder what the heck's going on. And he told me then, he says, "Is this your car?" And I says, "Yes." And he said, "Well, we're looking for old cars before the war." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because they're going to make a movie called Tora, which is the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And we would like to know if we could rent your car and use your car in the movie." And I said, "Well, sure." Well, then they started filming Tora, and the first scenes was actually the bombing of the Arizona, because I remember being down at Pearl Harbor and I could see all the black smoke going up in the air and all this kind of stuff. And so weeks went by and I kept waiting for a phone call, and I never received this phone call. You know, like, what are they going to do with my car? When are they going to use it? And so finally I tried to get in touch with them. Well, I didn't know who to call, but boy, through the chain of commands, I finally got to the person, and I said, my car was supposed to be used. And he says, "Yeah, I know." But he says, "We found a red 39 Ford four-door convertible." And he says, "We use that one instead." So if you remember the movie and you see that red Ford convertible in there, that was probably about 3/4 of the way through the film. That red convertible took the place of my car.
Tip your ability to cap back just a little bit so you get to see a bit more light on your face. Yeah, that's good.
Right.
Okay. Growing up, what year did you go over to Pearl?
1937.
1937. So you were about 9.
I was
8 or 9.
I was 9.
9 years old
Right.
then. Okay, where did you go to grade school in LA then?
Well, all right, up there in Eagle Rock, I went to grammar school.
Was that the name of it, Eagle Rock Grammar School?
Well, no, it was, I forget the name of the school. Well, San Rafael was one of them also. But then when I went to Hawaii, I don't remember these Hawaiian names. I remember them all.
Yeah.
And
now, what your dad was he stayed on a ship over there, or?
No, he was strictly what I call the desk jockey. Worked in offices and all that kind of stuff. But you see, now what happened, what brought us back was that, as I said earlier, in all of 1941, there was a lot of tension, and my older brother, who, when he got out of the 11th grade in 1941, instead of getting a summer school job like most kids did, he wanted to be patriotic, so he joined the Army. And of course, that's made my dad a little bit unhappy, being a Navy man, because he wanted him or me or both of us to go to Annapolis, and neither one of us did. And so my brother joined the Army, and he took his training over there, and then he got shipped to the Philippines, and he was under
Where did you take his training?
at Schofield.
Oh, okay.
And then he got shipped to the Philippines, and he worked under Douglas MacArthur, and then he got caught in that Bataan Death March. And to this day, we don't know if he was ever bayoneted on the side of the road or was decapitated if he made it back to the prison camp. And what is so ironic is the fact that the death march started, I think, on April the 9th, and he would have been 18 on April the 15th, and we don't know if he ever saw or lived to see his birthday or not. And it was such a traumatic experience for my folks, which is understandable, and it left an impression on me also with a lot of hatred. And so the Navy shipped my dad back to L.A. In I guess it was around May of 41. I'm 42, right? And so he just worked, as I say, as a desk jockey. Well, then in 44, I was in junior high, and after the Normandy invasion, I could sort of see that the war was turning around in our favor, and because I had the hatred that I did, I wanted to be patriotic and serve my country also. Well, I didn't want the Navy because I didn't like the idea of being sunk down the bottom of the ocean with an iron coffin wrapped around me, and I didn't want the Army because of my brother's experiences. So, it was sort of a God's gift sin that I was born to use my hands and tools. And before I retired, I was a swimming pool contractor, and of course there's all kinds of tools of use there. And so I was very handy with tools. That's why I have my old car today, and I have other old cars too, or have had them also. And there was hardly a thing that I couldn't fix if you put the right tool in my hand, except my wristwatch. But so I decided that I wanted to be patriotic, and I figured, by golly, I'm going to try and join the Air Force. Mind you, I was only 16 at that time, but it took a lot of red tape and string pulling, and of course my dad helped. And so after many interviews with the recruiting office, they finally called me down and said, okay, the Air Force is guaranteed to accept you, but we cannot guarantee to make a mechanic out of you. And I figured by this time, okay, so what, I've gone this far, that's to it. So they sent me down to Arizona, near Tucson, to take basic training. And the second day that
What was the name of the place you took?
I think it was called Marano or something like that. Marano.
Tucson?
It was near Tucson.
Okay.
And so the second day that I was there, the second lieutenant came out with a clipboard full of papers, and he lifted up the papers and he read them, and he called out my name, and he walks up to me and he eyeballs me from foot to head and back down to my feet. He looks at the papers again like he couldn't believe what he was reading. And he looks at me again from head to toe, and he says, "Mechanic be damned." He says, any fat man can become a mechanic. He says, you're the perfect size to fit in that. And with that, he points to a B-17 sitting on the ground at the ball turret. So then it was off to Kingman, Arizona for 5 weeks of gunnery school. Basic, 5 weeks of gunnery school in Kingman, Arizona.
So you have to gun it in Kingman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want to back up just a little bit here. Okay, what was your brother's name?
William. John William.
And did you have any other brothers and sisters?
No.
I don't know if you're aware. Last weekend we had Bataan.
I know it. I read that.
And we have a display downstairs. I don't know if you've seen that or not.
Was it in the Navy hangar?
Yeah, I'll take if you'd like to. I'll take it over and show it to you. Okay, so So your gunnery school in Kingman, huh?
Mhm.
Okay. How long were you there?
5 weeks.
What was that like?
Well, I learned a lot of things mighty fast.
Had you ever done any hunting or anything like
No,
that?
I
or
never
shooting?
did. No, I never did. And that's what, well, first of all, they started you off shooting a BB gun. And then after that, they went into shotguns with skeet. And then after that, I went into 30 caliber machine guns. And then I went into 50 caliber machine guns. And then they had mock-ups of the ball turret on a tripod with a plywood floor, and they had all the controls, the electronics and the hydraulics, teaching us how to get in and get out, and how to work our different pistol grips, because one pistol grip would make that ball revolve 360 degrees around. The other pistol grip made it go up and down vertically 90 degrees. So in other words, it was my steering wheel, just like your car.
Mm.
And so I took my training there. I was 1 inch over the regs. The regulations was 5'8", I was 5'9", and but as I said, this happened toward the end of the war, and by this time a lot of ball turret gunners were either captured, killed, wounded, or prisoners of war, whatever. So there was a great demand for ball turret gunners. And because we're sort of a special people, we're not necessarily midgets, but at the same time, we're not a big football player either.
Right. Yeah.
And but I wore the I wore the backpack parachute, so I would move the back lumbar that we have on our plane, and I would lean directly against the steel plates. So that made me very comfortable laying down on the job.
Did you? Was it fun shooting guns? I mean,
Well,
trying to hit things and stuff.
It was fun when I was in basic, because we
That's
did
what you
find right in the mock-ups with the tripod. We would shoot at targets, fixed targets, and try to see how well we did at aiming and all that kind of stuff. And then we graduated. We didn't graduated, but we then went into another plane towing a target, and then I sat in the B-17 and shot the ball turret from the B-17, and that was my only experience at shooting from B-17, because by the time I got over there, the war, as I say, was winding down, and I flew the last 3 missions. Well, in fact, when I got over there, they didn't stick me in a ball turret immediately, because by
okay, well, let's see. Okay, where did you fly to then? Where did you?
I went straight to Chelveston, England.
From Kingman?
No, they shipped me back east, and then I went over.
Where did you go back east then?
Up in Maine, I think it was.
Bangor, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. And then over to, where'd you say in England?
Chelveston, England. Chelveston.
Okay. And that was at B-17. Oh, well, tell me.
That was
B-17.
the 305th Bomb Group. I was in the 364th Bomb Squadron. And when I first got over there, because the war was coming near an end, there wasn't many casualties or POWs, so at that point they didn't really need a ball turret gunner. So they made a caddy out of me for a while. I was washing windshields and pumping up the tires and cleaning out the plane, sort of like the ground crew, really. But then I guess they felt they'll give me a chance, so I flew the last 3 missions. And the last mission was on Wednesday, April the 25th, 1945. And the target was Pilsenskoda, Czechoslovakia, which was an ammunition manufacturing plant. And on that day's combat mission, the last combat mission, they had some leaflet missions afterwards. But on that last mission, there were 589 bombers in the air that day. And there was no aerial combat because the German Air Force was already in ruins, and for those few planes that were not in ruins, they didn't even have gas for it. But they still had flak, and they shot up the flak at us, and out of the 589 bombers, we lost 6. It is unfortunate that now that's not the one bomb group. There was lots of bomb groups to make up this total. So it is unfortunate that we had to lose anybody on that last combat mission, but when you really stop and think about it, 6 out of 589 is a rather small ratio.
So, okay. So then Did you come back right away then?
Not right away, but soon right away. They gave me and the ground crew a lot of flights over Berlin, Berlin and other German cities that were heavily bombed, and so I could see what all happened. Just say I didn't get to see most of that. And
did you do any relief missions where you take food and stuff to?
No,
Food drops
I
and that stuff?
didn't get on any of that.
Yeah.
And then what happened then? They sent me back to Kingman, which was the gunnery school. They sent me back to Kingman to wait out to see if I was going to be needed in the Pacific. And so as a result, Japan gave up in 1945 also. So I wasn't needed in the Pacific, and then in November of 1945, they came along and gave me my honorable discharge. And they said, now look, we know you didn't go to high school, so you are now a civilian, no reserves, you are a civilian. Go back to high school and get your high school diploma, which I did. And then
You went back to Glendale?
no, Eagle Rock.
Eagle Rock. Okay, no, I'm not sure where Eagle Rock is.
Eagle Rock High School. It's a little community. It's a suburb of Los Angeles. It's between Glendale and Pasadena. And so at any rate, also at that time, it was by law.
So how old were you then when you went back to high school?
I was 20
Oh, really?
when I graduated, that is.
Were there other guys your age back in high school? Like when you...
There was another guy that probably was about my age. He was in the Marines, and he was in Iwo Jima, and then he came back and finished high school. And there may be others, but I don't know about them. So at this time, it was mandatory that everybody had to, when you were 18, you had to sign up for the selective service, or known as the draft. Well, I did it because I had to. It was law. And I didn't think much about it. I mean, we just got over a huge war. What dangers are going to be for another war? So I signed up by law. And in 1950, when Korea broke out with no advance warning at all, guess who was one of the first ones to be grabbed? I guess my Uncle Sam figured that, hey, we spent a lot of time and money training this guy, and we didn't get much out of him in return. So I was one of the first ones grabbed, and of course I was on my knees and begging and borrowing and crying crocodile tears, trying to get back in the Air Force, but I couldn't convince him because I was honorably discharged. I signed up for the draft, and that was it. There was no reserves. If I had known that Korea was going to come along, I naturally would have gone down to the recruiting office and tried to get in the Air Force again. So as a result, they sent me up to Fort Ord, and they gave me a little refresher course. I think the normal length of basic training is something like, I forget for sure, but I think it was 16 weeks. But they sent me up there for about 3 weeks just to give me a little refresher course. And then they stuck me on a troop ship, and over to Japan I went. And then every day they would call out hundreds of names because they were going to go to this division or that division or whatever, but they didn't call my name out.
Okay, was fighting in Korea going on at this time?
Oh, yes. Yes, this was in...
So when did it?
Korea started on June 25th, 1950.
Now let me ask you, had you finished high school by this time?
Oh, yes.
Okay, okay, let's back up a little bit. Did you work while you were going to school?
No.
What did you do when you...
When I got out of high school, I sort of goofed around. I would, if I saw a job that looked appealing to me, I would have applied for it, but otherwise I didn't put my nose to the grindstone and really try to go out to get a job. I was just sort of goofing around a little bit.
Yeah.
And, but it didn't take much goofing around before, it was only 2 years of goofing around, then Korea broke out. Yeah. And so
you're in Japan.
So I was in Japan, and I was wondering, a lot of guys already got called and shipped over to Korea, and I was...
Well, had they put you into the MPs by this time? Or?
Well, that's what I'm coming to.
Okay.
Then finally one day they called out my name and a few other guys, and they sent me to combat MP school in Japan. So I was sort of lucky again. Well, I guess one way or the other, my Uncle Sam was going to make a special gunner out of me, a bolter, a gunner, or a combat MP.
Okay, well, tell me what is a combat MP?
It's a guy that directs traffic, heavy armament, directs them around. That's a combat MP now.
That's what I mean.
Right, right. Make sure the tanks go down this road and the trucks go down the other road or whatever. And now a regular MP, they just sort of patrol around, write up a DR, which means delinquent report, and things
And
like
did you
that.
have sidearms or what did you?
Oh yes, I had my .45 and I had a carbine. And so
So what did you think of all the things they could have sent you to? I mean, what was your thought about this?
I was angry. I was angry because I got stuck in the Army after all,
Yeah.
and they would not accept me back in the Air Force, which I wanted to get into. But I sort of, in one way, I felt, okay, if I have to be over here, I did feel a little bit lucky being a combat MP rather than an infantryman crawling on my belly through everything. And I entered Korea in September 20th, I think it was, 1950, and I saw Seoul liberated on September the 29th.
Where did you go into Korea?
Through Incheon.
Incheon. How did you get there? Fly or on ship or what?
No, it was by boat. It was by boat and landing craft. By this time, Incheon had already been invaded, and so therefore it wasn't under combat conditions.
Okay, I want to go to the map here a little bit. This doesn't show Korea really blown up, but it tells kind of, I think, pretty much where in relation to Japan, China, and some of this stuff is. So here, let's take that pencil. Maybe you can. Let me move over here. Let me get this into here a little bit. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move up here a little. Okay, I see. Is that the Chosin Reservoir up here they're talking about?
Oh, I'm trying to find Korea.
Well, I think is it this? Yeah, this is.
This
is probably
there's
Usaaf.
Busan. Okay, it's sort of strung outside horizontally.
Right. Yeah.
I guess because of the
way that thing is.
Right.
That's Japan.
So in other words, I left Sasebo on boat, and I actually came around and landed in Incheon.
Okay.
And with other troops.
And where would Seoul have been? I don't think
Seoul,
it's on there.
well, it should be on here because I see Busan.
I see Busan.
Seoul, you're right, it's not on here. It's about in the center of this here looks like the 38th parallel.
Probably
So Seoul, yeah, it's not on here for some reason.
And before we'll get to this a little bit, but when you got wounded, where were you?
I was above the 38th parallel in a town of, or I don't know if it was even a town, but it was a village called Kumwa.
Okay, we'll get to that then. But so that's near the 38th parallel.
Yeah, just a little bit above the 38th parallel.
Okay.
In fact, Kumwa, it's sort of like a triangle. There was Kumwa and another city of which escapes my memory right at the moment, and then on top of that was I can't say it, Pumanjam.
Oh, Panmunjom. Is that where they signed all this?
Right, that's where they sort of made a triangle, and Kumwa was over to the right.
How do you spell Kumwa?
Excuse me for a minute. Let me get out the correct.
Oh, sure, go ahead. I can always see it from you later too, for that matter. That's right, yeah. I'll pick that up. Yeah, I just need to look.
I think it's K-U-M or K-H-U-M. I got it right here. K-U-M-W-H-A.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you land in Incheon
And I saw the liberation of Seoul.
Okay.
And then I spent the rest of 1950 and all of 1951 all up and down Korea. I've got up as far as the Yalu River, down through the Chosin Reservoir, through that fiasco as a combat MP. wasn't with the Marines, but as a combat MP, I was sent everywhere. And
during that time, we were retreating. Was that kind of chaotic? I mean, I
Yes.
suppose you were trying to direct traffic.
I was
It must
trying
have
to
been-
direct traffic, and
What was that like?
everybody, it was panicky. It was very panicky because by this time the Chinese was entering the war, and after we got all the way up to the Yellow River with just the North Koreans only, and then we thought if the war was going to come to an end, we'd be home by Christmas, but it didn't turn out that way. And so on the retreat, and then that's when Seoul was recaptured again, and then MacArthur was fired, which I have personal feelings about.
What are your feelings about that?
I think it was wrong. I think it was wrong that he should be fired. You have to remember that he's still the #1 scholastic member of West Point today. Nobody has ever passed him up. And he used every island in the Pacific Ocean for a stepping stone to Japan. I think he was a brilliant strategist. He might have been a demagogue, but so was Patton. And he was my #1 general in my mind. And I know that.
Okay, let's think about two things. One, at the time, what were your thoughts about going into China, and what are your thoughts nowadays? Or did you even think about it then?
Well, of course, the war at that time, the war had only World War II had only been over for about 5 years, 6 years at the greatest, and we already used the atomic bomb. And of course, there was talk about using the atomic bomb in China, and that's what MacArthur wanted to do, was to bomb Manchuria to break up the Chinese buildup that they were having, and that would. My feeling is that would let the rest of the world know that we still have the bomb and we still mean business and don't mess around with us. But of course, the more I hear and see and read about it, Truman, in my opinion, was the wrong man to make this choice, but he did. But I guess he was going against policy that the president is supposed to make. In other words, as Truman said in one of his films that I saw, I'm trying to stop World War III, and he's trying to start World War III. So I have mixed emotions on it, but I still think it was a mistake, because I think he was a great general.
Okay, so now Seoul has fallen. You guys are retreating.
Right.
So how far did you retreat?
Not too far. It wasn't anything like the Pusan perimeter, which would have been another Dunkirk had we not invaded Incheon. That's another thing I like about MacArthur. I mean, he was such a brilliant strategist, because everybody thought that would be the last place to try and invade. But he was clever enough. He figured out the tides and what he'd have to do. So that's why I respect the man highly. But at any rate, then not Van Fleet, but Ridgway, Matthew Ridgway, right? He was in command at this time, and then we slowly but surely pushed him above the 38 parallel, and it was this sort of a stalemate, back and forth, and that went on the whole year of 1951, and then it was on January, in the middle of December, mid-December, they'd already taken away my MP status. Not that I did anything wrong or anything, but they needed riflemen in the worst way, because the lines were spread thin, and there was like we had to. The orders were to hold the line, and there was 2 men to a position, and we would sleep 1 hour on and 1 hour off, and that went on for a few days, and then someone of the higher command decided that they wanted Chinese prisoners to capture for interrogation. So they formed up 2 squad companies, and I was in charge of one squad. There were 9 men in there, and we hiked up a hill, and I got a look at the lay of the land, but it was, and then 5 of them disappeared where I don't know, and there was only 4 of us. And then later on January 12th, 1952, at midnight, there was a captain, and he told me to form up a squad, and I had 6 men, counting myself. There were 6 of us, and I had to try and look over this one peak of the mountain to see what was on the other side, and I could see an enemy bunker. It was a circular trench type bunker, and I told, I ran back, and I told the guys what we were going to do. We were going to come up one at a time and drop down and try to capture that bunker without killing them. And so I ran up first, and I hid behind a little bush that was leafless. It didn't really hide me. And of course there was snow on the ground, and so the enemy had lots of black specks to shoot at, because we certainly weren't camouflaged in white, that's for sure.
And what were you carrying then?
I still had my carbine, right, and my sidearm. And no, I take it back. I had my M1 rifle by this time. Right.
And what kind of firepower did they have?
They had their, what they call them, the burp gun, and of course they still had their hand grenades. We would refer to them as a potato masher, because just like the German hand grenade, which looked like a potato masher.
Was a burp gun? Was it like a Tommy gun?
Yeah,
kind of?
sort of like a Tommy gun, right? And it was just another form of a fast machine gun, really, when you held it in your hand. And
and did you guys all have rifles, or did you have
no, we all
had a BAR with you or anything like that?
No, we only had rifles only. And I got up to the top of the ridge, and then the second guy came up to the top of the ridge and plopped down to my side, and then the third guy, and then the fourth guy. And just as we got up to the ridge, the second guy that came up got shot in the shoulder. So he sat down in the snow, and that left the 3 of us. So then the third guy, as we were trying to work our way down to this Chinese trench, he got hit between the eyes, and he never knew what hit him. Of course, by this time, I was scared to death. Because
had you seen guys killed in combat prior to this?
Oh yes, oh yes. And but this is the closest that I got to him, especially in my squad, people that I knew by name, except the guy that got shot in the shoulder. I never did learn his name. But so he just sat down in the snow, like, I'm hurt, I can't go on any further. So then the 3 of us continued down the hill to get to to sneak up on the back side of the enemy. And then the third guy, he got a bullet right between the eyes, so that left 2 of us. So I told him, I said, I'm going to dive into that trench right down there, and you follow me. So the 2 of us started to run for the trench, and I dove in first and landed right on top of a dead Chinaman, and or dead Chinese, I guess I should say. And as the second guy was getting ready to jump into the trench, he took a hand grenade right to the head. So that took care of him. So I was in the trench all by myself, laying on top of a dead Chinese soldier. And so I got up, and I started to move to my right, and all of a sudden a hand grenade came right into the trench and exploded. And it, I don't know if it was the first one or the second one, but maybe it was both of them. But at any rate, I was injured in the legs, and I had a lot of holes in my back. And then a second hand grenade came in, and by this time I was clinging to the walls of the trench, and perhaps that's what may have saved my life, because the explosions always go up, but because I was clinging to the trench, maybe that stopped it, I don't know, or I was just darn lucky. But so after the second hand grenade exploded, then I knew that then both of my legs were badly broken, from the knee down, and I was leaking blood like a sieve throughout a lot of holes in the back of my shirt or jacket. And so after that was over, then all of a sudden I was laying on my stomach, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, came this one Chinese soldier screaming at the top of his lungs, sort of like a death cry, with a dagger in his hand. He was going to run up and plunge it into my back, which, by the way, I still have today. I managed to, well, I'll come to that. So luckily I had my .45 sidearm, because I didn't have time to aim the rifle at the guy, so I just grabbed my sidearm and let him have it. So fortunately my .45 bullet could travel faster than he could run. So after I killed him, then I crawled over with using my elbows. I crawled over and I removed the scabbard and his dagger. And then I was leaning against the trench, and I got to thinking, here I am in enemy territory. What are my chances of being captured prisoner, not tortured, or even being captured at all and getting medical care, or what? So I managed to, I was in such a state of shock and pain and confused, I decided that maybe the best thing to do is, rather than be tortured, just end it all. So I managed to get my M1 nestled down between my crouch with the barrel up under my chin. And I probably would have pulled the trigger, except by this time I just passed out from pain. That was it. I couldn't take any more. Between shock and pain, I guess that was it. So then the next thing I saw was a captain, and he was down in the trench and he was looking down at me, and I guess maybe he thought I was dead. I don't know what he was thinking, but then he crawled out of the trench and ran away. That's the last I saw him. And then two other guys come from another company or division, I don't know which. I never saw them before. They looked down at me and they said, all right, we're going to grab you by your flak vest collar and my gun belt, and we're going to pull you out and we're going to run like the Dickens. And so there they were, dragging me with my face down. I couldn't see much, face down, my broken legs going all across the rough terrain, which was not very comfortable, to say the least. And but I was a heavy load for these guys, and of course they were running in a sort of a bent over position and not being up so straight, because we were all in enemy territory, that's for sure. And so this one guy, both of them decided to stop and take a little bit of a rest, and I managed to turn my head to my right, and lo and behold, there that soldier was that got hit in the shoulder earlier. He's still sitting in the snow, white, frozen, and dead. So I don't know what would kill him from a shoulder wound, but maybe it was shock, I don't know. But that's all that I saw that I remember. And while this guy was leaning over, he was sort of on his, bending over, catching his breath. And then a burp gun let loose with 2 slugs, and he caught 2 slugs in the thigh, and one of them was right close, just inches away from my face. So again, I was spared. And then he went rolling off into the trees, screaming. And then a first lieutenant came out from, I don't know where he was, maybe he saw, but he went over and he rescued that guy and dragged him back. So the second guy that was with me, he said, I can't possibly haul you by myself. He said, I'm going to go out for help. Well, I pleaded with him not to leave me alone. I figured if I were going to die, he might as well die with me. But he took off anyway and left me there. And then I thought to myself, now what? And but it wasn't long, and then 6 chogis, that's a Korean litter bear, they call them a chogi, and they came along, and the 6 of them put me on a litter, and they started running like mad. And they took me over to a crater hole by one of our bombs or shells, and they stuck me in there, and then I guess they went off someplace else to find other guys. So then I think I was in that hole for probably an hour at least, maybe 2 hours, and then some other American, another group of chogis came along and picked me up, and then by this time we're starting to run downhill to get back to our friendly lines. And I slid off feet first, and they kept running, and I'm screaming my head off with my legs the way they were. And So they stopped and they put me back on, and they carried me a little more horizontal. They didn't have anything to tie me down on it, and they ran like the dickens. And it probably took a good 2 hours to get back to our friendly lines. And so by the
Now, were you bleeding all this time, or had the bleeding pretty well stopped?
well, it pretty well stopped. It didn't hit any arteries or anything
Now,
like
tell
that.
me, there was snow on the ground. What was it like around freezing?
Oh, definitely.
So that
Definitely,
might-
because
might help.
these chogies, every once in a while, they would stop to catch their breath, and one of them, to my right, the right rear, he would rub my hands between his hands, and that's probably what stopped me from getting frostbite on my hands. Oh yeah, it was definitely very cold. And so at any rate, that finally got me back to the so-called friendly lines, and then by this time, just as we got there, our tanks opened up and were firing right over the hill where we just came from. So I just got back in the nick of time. And so then I don't know if he was just a field medic or what, but he managed to he cut off my boots and my 3 layers of pants that I was wearing. We believed in the layer clothing to try and stay warm. And then he put some wooden splints on the side of my leg, and then he loaded me on another litter, and I was carried by Jeep. There were 3 of us on the Jeep, just like you used to see in MASH. And so when we got back to maybe it was a MASH unit, I'm not sure what it was, but at any rate, there was nurses there. And the last thing I remember was that when this one nurse, she came over and she cut off all my clothing, and then she said something about a shot, and I guess I passed out again. So then they put me on a cracker box, which is like a coffin, only it's just plain flat boards, and that's to stop you from rolling around all over the place. So that's what we call a cracker box. So they managed to get me down to Seoul, and I was in Seoul one night, and from there they loaded me on another cracker box on a C-47, and went over to Tokyo, and I spent about 2 to 3 weeks in Tokyo. And then from there, they transferred me down to Osaka, which was the 279th General Hospital in Osaka, and that's where I spent the rest of my 7 months, and recuperating. And then, much to my disappointment, and that's perhaps why I dislike the Army today again, is that I thought for sure by this time I would get to go home. But no, they sent me back to Korea. Only this time, they stuck me in the Provost Marshal's office as a clerk typist. And I guess they figured I could still walk and eat and all that kind of stuff, and I wasn't in that bad a condition. So
Was this in Seoul?
no, this was up. Well, yeah, I guess. No, oh, golly, where was it? It wasn't in Seoul itself. It was with the 2nd Division where the MP company was stationed. At that particular time, I don't remember the name. It may have been Uijambu. Now that's a French spelling, and I can't. It starts out with U-I something, but it's pronounced Uijambu. And so they made a clerk typist out of me, and out of the Provost Marshal's office, they have what is called the PMI, which stands for Provost Marshal Investigation or Investigator. And so I was taught to become a PMI. And now PMI, if it's a real serious case, they go out and get the facts and then turn it over to CID, which stands for Criminal Investigation Department. And if it's a minor case, like a self-inflicted gun wound or somebody robbed a Korean civilian or something, then it's strictly a PMI case alone. And so after being in PMI for a while, then they transferred me down to 8th Army Headquarters, which stands for, which is USAC, E-U-S-A-K, USAC, which means the United States Army Korea. And
Is that in Seoul?
no, that's what was down in Daegu. And so then I continued to work in the office of the Provost Marshal. This is where the general, all the big shot generals would stay in Daegu. And that by that time it was safe hands for sure. And then so I was a typist. I did mostly PMI work. And then after a while, they gave me the opportunity to learn CID, which I enjoyed immensely. So I wore fancy clothes and I patrolled around Tegu, and anytime that something happened in some other division or wherever, they would call down for CID to come and take the case over, and that was the purpose of CID.
So this would be an investigation?
Yeah,
type?
it's criminal investigation. It's sort of like a detective. Today, you know, you go to the police department, you have a plainclothesman detective. I didn't wear rank, and but that's what I was in, was CID. And
did you wear a uniform or?
yeah, I just wore the regular uniform, and then if I'm patrolling around Tegu, I wore fancy clothes, you know, polished boots and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And then on April the 30th, 1953, I guess Uncle Sam decided to turn me loose on society, so they sent me home.
Were your parents still alive?
Yes, they were still alive at that time.
Having lost one son and with you in such harm's way, that must have been pretty tough on them, was it
was
not?
very tough on them. And as a result, they hated the Army and President Truman also.
Now, had your dad retired?
Yes.
He retired from the
Yeah,
Navy by that
he
time?
retired by this time.
Did he work? Did he work after he retired?
Not really. Not really. Maybe he'd do a little odds and ends, but as far as having a payroll 40 hours a week, no.
Okay, so when you left Korea, where did you come back to then?
I came back to L.A.
What'd you do then?
You want me to go into that?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I took a liking to CID, criminology, and gee, that's something that I like to follow through with. So I went down to the headquarters in Los Angeles, the police department, and I told them of my experience, and that I would like to work in criminology. And I was told then that the civilian life is a little bit different than military life. We had what is called seniority. And so I could not see standing out there at 5th and Main with a whistle in my mouth directing traffic around. So I figured, okay, I'll try going up to Glendale Police Department, which has patrol cars only. And at that time, the Glendale Police Department had specifications that you had to have 20/20 vision without glasses. You had to be a certain height and a certain weight, and I could not be either one of the three. So I figured, okay, I'll try the California Highway Patrol. And they had the same specifications. So I figured, well, I don't know any trade or anything. So I figured, well, in as much as I disliked the Army, I went back to the recruiting office and I said, look, I says, I was in Hawaii before. If I re-up for another 20 years, could I get in CID and stay there? Of course, Vietnam had not broken out yet, so, but I made them, I just made the request that I would stay in Hawaii. Of course, if I'd known that Vietnam was going, I would have made them promise me not to send me to Vietnam, but they didn't anyway. I stayed in Hawaii. So I re-upped for 20 years. And then in 1969, doing CID work, that is. And then in 1969, my father passed away. My mom and dad were both living down here in Palm Springs. And so my mom came over in the summer of 1969 and stayed at my place for the summer and took a trip to Tahiti and several places. She did the same thing again in 1970. And by this time, in 71, I was getting a little bit disgusted with the Army. And I didn't like the idea of my mom being down here all by herself. So, like a darn fool, and I'm kicking myself in the butt, after 18 years, I decided to get out. If only I could have stuck out another 2 years, I would have had it really made. And but I just wanted out, and so I got out, came here, and in fact, I arrived in this town in my old 41 Ford, which came from Hawaii. I arrived in this town on August the 30th, 1971, and I rented a house down there, which is now Rancho Mirage, but at that time it was Cathedral City. And then I sort of made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to buy the first thing that I saw, like I did in Hawaii. It was a nice place, but I just didn't care for that.
Wait. Let's back up just a little bit.
All right.
Okay, because we got 18 years there. That I'm sure something happened.
Yeah.
So did you stay in Hawaii for 18 years in the Army then?
Yeah.
So they kept their promise from
Yeah,
that way.
that's right.
Well,
That's
good.
right. Plus the 4 years that I was over there, from 37, about 4.5 years it was, from 37 to 42.
Now, and you did CID work the whole time.
Yes.
And in what capacity? I mean, I would assume that you moved up in rank and things like that. Or
Well,
whatever,
not exactly.
responsibility.
Not exactly. They. I don't know what their thinking was, but they just sort of kept me at the. I did not become an officer. In no way did I ever become an officer. And I suppose I could have, but I just. It was really an easy life because there was no
Now,
war going on.
were you married? Did you get married while you were
No,
there?
no. And it was very easy work, and I thought at last I had it made. And of course, if I had stuck it out for 2 more years, I would have had it made more so.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know. It was so. When after coming back here, I was too young naturally to draw Social Security.
Now, had you? How is it that your parents ended up in Palm Springs?
My dad's health and the dry heat is what he needed, and with lots of oxygen. In other words, he was advised to get out of L.A. and go to the desert or the ocean. But what he was told that if he came to the desert, to go down to the low desert rather than the upper desert. Well, my dad couldn't see that, so he went to the beach in Santa Barbara, and the dampness of the air affected him even worse. So then they made weekend trips down here and discovered that Palm Springs was a place for him. But he continuously got worse. And,
Had you come over? Had you spent much time in Palm Springs before you moved here?
well, ironically, in 1937, before we moved to Hawaii, I came down here. The first time in my life that I ever saw Palm Springs was in 1937. And at that time, they had boardwalks in front of the Plaza Theater, and you didn't walk many blocks, and then it just became dirt.
You're right. Okay. So, so you were renting a house in Rancho Cathedral City,
Yeah, right.
which is Rancho Mirage now.
And this one Sunday afternoon, it was in September, it was still hot, I decided I wanted to take in the Indian reservation. So I went up there in the canyon where Bob Pond lives, and they had a big gate across the road, closed until October 1st. So on my way back, I was traveling along Highway 111, and down there where the Cadillac agency just went in, they had a little wooden shack up on high off the ground, and that was the sales office for the homes pointing at Bankside. And the sale or the price of those homes were fantastic. And ironically, I drove up as high as I could. It's a tract home, but there was 3 phases, and this was phase 2. And I pulled into my very own driveway. It was up on a cul-de-sac. It was as high as I could go. And the doors were already locked, but there was no carpeting or anything like that yet. And I sort of thought, gee, I like this place. I went down next door, yeah, I like this place. I went down to the corner shop, yeah, I like this place. So the next day, I went down to the sales office, which was a Monday, and I said, he said, well, I don't have many homes left in phase 2. He said, we're going to start phase 3 pretty soon. And he shows me this map where he has a bunch of thumbtacks in it. And he says, what place did you park in or like? And I said, well, I like this one here in the corner. He said, well, that one's sold. But I said, I parked my car in this one. He says, that's not sold. It's a pie-shaped yard with very little backyard. So my swimming pool's on the side of the house rather than the back of the house. And he gave me the key to the place I'm in now, and he gave me the key to the other. There was only 2 houses left in phase 2, and he gave me the key to the other place. It had a little better panoramic view of the valley, but I still had neighbors living in back of me, whereas where I'm at now, there's no neighbors in back of me. And I sort of like that one. So we talked terms, and before you know it, I bought the doggone place. And
you're still living there.
I'm still. It's ironic that this week, the day after Thanksgiving, will make exactly 30 years that I started moving into the house. The day after Thanksgiving in 1971. So 30 years it is.
And so, did you work here in Palm Springs then?
Yeah, I not knowing a trade, there's lots of swimming pools down here, so I became a pool man, and it was easy money, and it was nice, except when the winds blew like heck.
How many pools did you have?
Oh gosh, I think I started off with 30, and I got myself up to 45 or 50, but then I dropped back, and I was working 3 times a week on one set of pools. Like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday I would call on one set, and then on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday I'd call on the other set. And at that time we were doing 3 times a week service.
Did you have anybody helping you?
No. Except a couple times we got in a horrible windstorm up here at the north end of town, and 2 of the pools really got filled with sand, so I had my son working with me all day Saturday to just clean 2 pools. And I told the guys that, if this ever happens again, I said, I'm draining out the water and I'm going to shovel it out with a wheelbarrow. It was really thick. And then in 1978 is when we had our first big building boom going on around here. And a lot of guys, a lot of other pool men decided to throw their hat in the ring and go grab their state contractor's license. And so I did the same thing. I figured why not? To build pools, refurbish pools, fix pools, anything of that nature. But I did grab my C-53 license, which entitled me to build pools. And but I didn't build very many of them. I seem to like refurbishing pools, like drilling a hole with a core drill, a 2-inch hole through the 12 inches of gunite to put in a new return line or a suction line or whatever, replumb, all this kind of stuff. There was lots of tools involved, diamond saw blades, whatever. And so I really, and then of course if somebody's motor burned out, they would call me up. My motor won't run anymore. What's wrong with it? So I'd sell them a new motor, things of this nature. So refurbishing pools and fixing pools is what I did most. I only built, I think, about 3 of them. I can tell you this, at that time, and it's probably still true today, I don't know for sure, but at that time, the C-53 license, excuse me, the C-53 license to build pools, they had the highest bond that I had to put up. I had to put up a $10,000 bond where everybody else had to put up a $5,000 bond. And the liability insurance was quite high. At that time, it was something like $7,000 a year. Today, I understand that's about close to $20,000 a year. So that's why I just couldn't stand this. So I still carried my C-53 license, but I converted it over to a regular, I forget what the number was, but it's where you're allowed to go around and fix pools and things of this nature. It's not actually building. And so therefore that reduced my bond and reduced my liability insurance and everything else.
When did you stop working on pools?
I guess, well, by this time, unfortunately, as much as I love the sun, I used to be a sun worshiper. Yeah. But the sun finally got caught up with me, and my skin and the sun don't agree with each other anymore. And so I have to stay covered up, wear long sleeve shirts, and then wear cotton gloves when I'm driving to stop the sun from coming into the window of the car. And I'm plagued with this skin cancer all the time. I'm seeing my dermatologist about every 3 or 4 months, and I'm always knocking things off my arms, the back of my hands, my forehead. I'm told that my skin over the years have just absorbed so much ultraviolet rays that it won't absorb anymore. And I could lock myself in a dark dungeon for the rest of my life, and these things are still going to surface. So I've just learned to live with it.
So when did you stop?
I think I worked my pool business down to about 15 of my favorite customers right through the center of Palm Springs. I wasn't going all over the place like I was doing. And they were my best customers as far as pay and not giving me a bad time and all this kind of stuff. And I think I only had about 12. And but people would call, through the word of mouth, people would call me up and say, I think I got myself up to 18. I didn't want that many, but I did anyway. And then in 1985, I finally sold the remaining of the business. And then there's another guy up around the corner that of my corner that fixes pools also. So a lot of times I would just I continue to fix them also, but not too heavy of a job because I had to watch out standing in the sun.
Yeah.
And I had to wear a lot of clothing, and of course during the summertime I would get very hot, and I didn't like that anymore. So, but if I got a big project going, and if this other guy was a little bit slow, I would hire him, just paying piecemeal, not on the payroll. I didn't want to become an employer. And then likewise, if he got real busy on a big project, and if I wasn't too busy, he'd hire me. And so we worked together like that. I officially quit the business, I think it was 1988 or maybe 87. And then 10 years ago, in 1989, I did a little bit of hotel security work, but because of trying to stay out of the sun, I did graveyard shifts from 8 to 4 in the morning. Or no, the first place was this new Stouffer's Esmeralda Hotel. It's a different name now, but I helped open that place. And the hours there were from midnight until 8 in the morning. Well, I'm a poor day sleeper, and I could not, I could go to bed and maybe sleep about an hour, then I'd wake up and I'd see the light coming in through the window, I'd hear the birds chirping, and I figured it's silly for me to lay here in bed when I got to do this and do that, and I just couldn't stand it. So I quit that job because I found another place here in Palm Springs that where I was working alone. There was not a gang of security officers, and so I worked alone, and the hours were from 8 to 4. Well, that was not too bad, but because I would get to bed about 4:30 and I would sleep until about 8:30 or 9, but then again I was losing sleep, continuously losing sleep. And of course I'm eating breakfast at 12 noon, which wasn't right. And I was eating dinner about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Then I would brown bag it and take a lunch at midnight, and this just upset my whole system. So in fact it was December the 31st, 1991. I said that's it. So I haven't worked since.
Yeah. And when did you get married?
1966.
Okay. And what's your wife's name?
Irene.
And where did you meet her?
I met her in L.A.
What was she doing there?
I think she was working in an insurance company.
What was her maiden name?
Garcia.
Garcia?
Mm-hmm.
And where were her parents from and stuff? What was her background?
Gosh, I don't know too much about that.
Yeah.
I think they were. I think they were all from Texas.
And how many children do you have?
Just 2 sons,
And what's their names?
Larry and John, Jon.
And what do they do?
Larry is now, he'll be 45 on the 27th of this month. He is now an electrical engineer down in Phoenix, Arizona. And what he does, he works directly under the boss. and they have several big projects going, big projects. And what he does, he used to be foreman of a single project and tell his workers what to do today and all that kind of stuff. Now he's graduated to the point where he drives around and inspects the other foremen to see if they're following the blueprints right. And he has the authority to fire and hire and make a guy take it out and do it over if it's done wrong. And so I'm quite proud of him. For a while there, I didn't hold out much hope for him because he just never seemed to get his act together. But when he went down to Phoenix, he really got his act together. My other son, John, he was, this last July, he just turned 40. And he has been for a long time a professional photographer. He works in a laboratory, and if people want artwork reproduced or something, he has a special camera and a special darkroom to do all this in, and he shoots pictures, or they use the computer now and make prints all over.
Where does he live?
In Ventura.
Any grandchildren?
One.
What's your grandchild's name?
His name is Brett, B-R-E-T-T.
Now I know one of your hobbies is automobiles.
Yes.
Things like, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I've always enjoyed cars. Even as a youngster, again, going back to being a mechanic, I would just pick up a tool and I knew what to do. And this sort of overwhelmed my dad at first because where did he learn this from? But I've always loved cars, and I've always had it in the back of my mind for many years that I wanted to get an old car and restore it. And at that time, I had a Model T Ford in the back of my mind. Well, as it turned out, my 41 Ford, my grandfather bought that brand new in Hawaii, and then he passed away in '62. My grandmother didn't drive at all, so in '63, I inherited the car. And it didn't need what is called a body-off restoration or a ground-up restoration. They both mean the same, but it just needed a lot of cosmetic work. And by a lot, I mean a lot. Re-chroming, reupholstering, everything. However, the original paint is still on the firewall and still inside the door frames, but the outside of the car has been repainted, but the same color. And all the fender welding has been removed.
What color is that?
It's what they call Palisades gray. It's sort of a grayish green. It looks mostly green, but it sort of has a gray tone to it. And it's a Dearborn car. I used to be a judge in the early Ford V8 Club of America, and I learned all about what to look for so I could fix up my own car.
You were a judge in what?
I was a master. I turned it. Well, first I started with a judge, and then a senior judge, and then a master judge. So I've done it that many years.
But I mean, what's the organization
Oh,
called?
the early Ford V8 Club of America.
Okay, and you still have that car?
Oh, yes.
So, let's see. Any other? You restored any other?
Well, I bought a brand new. I bought a 1965 Buick Skylark Grand Sport, which was equivalent to the Pontiac GTO. And I had that for a good number of years, and I swore I would never get rid of it because that was a real performing car, I'll tell you. And but in 1996, or yeah, I think it was 96. If not, it was 95. 96, I think it was. There was a elderly lady who just died recently. I found her obituary in the newspaper, and she had a 1981 Lincoln Continental Mark 6, all white with blue velour upholstery and chrome spoked wheels with a white vinyl top. And I I discovered that the first time I saw this car, I was fixing something on her swimming pool, and then I went back a couple of years later, and I noticed the car over there again, and I go, wow, it's a beautiful little car. And finally I asked her, I said, if the day should ever come that you would like to part with this car, would you give me first crack at it? And she says, okay. And about 5 years went by, and then on a Saturday she called me up. She says, are you still interested in my Lincoln? And I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw it. It only had 19,000 miles on it. Right now today, as it sits in my garage, it's only got 23,000 miles on it. And I've taken that to a couple car shows, and to the Lincoln car show, that is. And the first time I was there, I won first prize in my category. And then the second time, I won the first prize of the best of the classification, and I won the big silver cup. I mean, this silver cup is, you could chill a bottle of champagne in it. It's so big, and it says right on there, best in the primary division, the Ford Motor Company Award, and blah blah. This with my name on it, and so that put me in the senior class. And when I had the car judged again, March of this year up at Las Vegas, I only won second place in the senior division, because when you graduate into the senior division, they really get to be picky.
Did you ever win anything for your Ford?
Oh yes, I got 2 Dearborns, which is as high as you can go. I mean, you start off with a third, second, and first place, and then you get a Dearborn, and then you get a medallion. After that, I have a big plaque, and every time I get a medallion, I just stick it on. And and then I got a little thing to screw up my license plate that says Dearborn car. And in order to win a Dearborn car out of 1,000 points, you have to have at least 940, and I got 965. And from now on, all I have to do, the car will never be point judged again. I enter it in the Dearborn class, and pop the hood open, and the judge just walk around it just to make sure that it's still the way it's supposed to be. But that's all. No more point judging.
Do you still keep your eye out for any other cars?
I'm always keeping my eye out for other cars, but I don't have no place to keep them. There was a time there that I had 7 cars.
Oh, really?
And it just got, I built a carport over my driveway. Well, that took care of 4 of them, but that still left 3 of them that had to sit out in the winter. And the sun down here is murder on cars. If not the rubber, the paint, it oxidizes it. And I had car covers, and the winds would blow them off, or they would get rainy. So I finally managed to get rid of them. So I just got the 4 cars today, 2 moderns, and the 41 Ford and the 41 Lincoln, which is made by Ford. So they're both backed into my garage, and when I pop the garage door open, I see the front end of both of these cars, and there's quite a difference in 40 years of design.
How did you get interested in the Air Museum?
Good question. I heard, well, I wanted to come see the museum. Let me back up. On opening day, November 11th, 1996, which is when the museum opened up, I belonged to the DAV, that's Disabled American Veterans. We had a memorial service out at the cemetery, and a few of us decided that we were going to go and stop off and see the museum on opening day. And I was still wearing my DAV cap with all the ribbons attached to the side. But there was a huge line of cars trying to get into this place on that day. So the other 2 cars decided to go home, but I stuck it out, and I ended up making a U-turn and parking down here at the Millionaires Club, and they had a little shuttle pick me up. They brought me up here. And while I was here, I was still wearing my DAV cap, and I was in the Navy hangar, and this woman tapped me on the shoulder, and she asked me, she says, where do all the monies go to that you guys collect? And I told her, and she said, well, if I write you a check, would you accept that? And I said, sure. She said, who did I make it out to? So I told her. So she went off to a place where she could write out a check. And she handed me $100 check. I was flabbergasted. So and then at that time, then my son came down here for a weekend, and we came here, but we didn't have much time, and that's when I discovered that you had movies down there in the auditorium all the time. So I vowed that I was going to come back here someday and spend the day. And so that's what I did. I don't remember the date, but at any rate, I came here to spend the day to see all the movies, because I heard that there was a good film on B-17s, which I was highly interested in. And while I was up there at the counter paying my money, or entrance fee, I don't know who it was behind the counter, but I don't know if the conversation came up or how it came about, but at any rate, I mentioned that I was a BTG, or bolt turret gunner, on the B-17, and there was a gentleman standing right next to me, and I think it was Mark Wilson, but I can't prove it. At any rate, his ears perked up, and he turned to me and he said, "Oh," he says, "we need bolt turret gunners. How would you like to join the museum and become a docent?" I never even heard the word docent in all my life. And I looked up in the dictionary, and it says instructor or teacher. Just 2 words. So I saw I stayed all day, and I saw all the movies, and I took home an application, and I joined the museum.
And you've been doing the B-17 pretty much the whole time.
Ever since.
What do you like best about it?
I just like talking to the public. Everybody that comes aboard that plane think that that's the most dangerous spot in the whole plane. And I've heard it all. I'm nuts. I'm crazy. That's a suicide mission. That's got to be the worst spot in the whole plane. But when I get through, but I tell them I've heard it all. In the 4 years that I've been here, I've heard them all, and I disagree with them all. And I've explained that. I'll clarify that by simply saying, I feel that every 10 men on that plane is just as vulnerable as the next guy. Because here the Germans were trying to blow the front end of the plane off with a 20 millimeter. They were famous for their side attacks. They were good for their flak. And I wore the backpack parachute. So therefore, I felt that the steel offered me more protection than the aluminum. And of course, if I wear the backpack parachute, that makes an easier escape also. I also, at first, I always tell them the first thing that people want to know is, how do I get in and when do I get in? And a lot of people, I guess they think I'm in there upon takeoff and landing, which is not true. And so when I explain it all to them, explaining to them about bailing out and the safety of the steel wrapped around me and all this kind of things, then I say, now, can any one of you convince me that that's the most dangerous spot in the whole plane? Yes, a round could come up, make a direct hit on me, kiss me goodbye because I was at the wrong place at the wrong second. But I would rather have that steel wrapped around me than this thin aluminum. And I always explain that, and then people, they'd agree with me. Yeah, I see your point. I see your point. But I enjoy talking with the public, especially the younger people that don't know too much about World War II. I get all the time, I'm told, thank you for saving the country. They shake hands with me. I've had numerous occasions where people have taken a picture of me, and I always hand them my business card and say, okay, you take my picture if you send me a print, and they do. Most of the time they do, sometimes they don't. And I enjoy it. I tell you, if I didn't have this something to do on Tuesday, I would be a lost boy, even though I still got plenty to do around the house. But
since September 11th, have you noticed people being even more so thanking you, or has it pretty much been the same all along?
You might have a good point there. Yeah, I believe so, especially with the younger people, because I think this event that happened brought back a lot of patriotism, and a lot of these younger people today, they just take life for granted, and they really don't know what patriotism means. And but yes, I truly believe that. And it's a little bit different kind of a war with no front lines, and we don't know who the enemy is exactly or where to find him. But nevertheless, yes, it's brought back a lot of patriotism. In fact, just to show you, to tell you something else, a week ago Sunday, Palm Springs had the big parade in Palm Springs, and I entered my car in the parade. And of course I had banners stuck on the side, Disabled American Veterans, Palm Springs Chapter 66, all this sort of thing. And I was in the parade, which is a mile long, and I was following a marching band. And as soon as I would get opposite the crowd on both sides of the street, everybody would stand up, applaud me, yay, thumbs up, waving the flags. And I even had one guy stand there and salute me.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit hard to salute back when you're trying to drive a car, but nevertheless, I saw this. Now, two things come to my mind. Are they cheering me because of the old car that I had in the parade, or were they cheering me because I'm a DAV?
I think it's
don't know.
DAV.
It's probably
I'm
DAV,
sure.
right? But because it was spelled out Disabled American Veterans.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I got a tremendous amount of cheers. Now, whether or not everybody got cheers when they got opposite the crowd, I don't know. I have no way of knowing. But it just seemed like as soon as I got opposite the crowds on both sides of the street, they would just stand up, they would clap, they would wave their flags, and a couple of times they would start to run out to me and shake my hand. They didn't come all the way, of course, but as I say, and I had a couple of guys, older gentlemen that were probably World War II veterans, stand there at attention and saluting me. All I could do was just sort of do this in return.
Yeah.
But
That is special.
but it was. I've entered my car 3 times. I've entered my Ford 3 times, and I entered my Lincoln once. So we've had 5 parades, and only 1 time did I not enter the car. And that 41 Ford is quite an attention drawer, that's for sure. In fact, I've asked Keith Irwin.
Yeah.
I've asked him, and I asked Tony, what would be the possibility of displaying it down there next to that 1940 Studebaker. And they said that they have to check with Bob Pond. I don't know if anything will come out of it. Maybe he wants his own cars down here only, but I think it would be a novelty. I'm willing to do that. It's true, I'm taking a risk that some kids don't try and nick it or scratch it, but I just like to show it off. And because it's original. I've got the original radiator hoses. Well, I mean, they're duplicates or replicas, but it's the original radiator hose, the original battery, Ford script battery, and so I mean, when you pop the hood, it looks just like it came off the showroom or right off the assembly line. And the original clock still ticks right now today, and the original radio still plays today. Mind you, this is 60 years old. Do you think that you'll be ticking at 60 years from now?
Tell me a little bit about the working aspects of a 41 Ford. I mean, stick shift, I assume.
Yes,
V8,
column shift, flathead V8, and no overdrive. They do have a Columbia overdrive, Columbia rear end they refer to it, and it is an overdrive, but my car doesn't have it. And I through my club, I have bi-monthly. I have a magazine that comes out, and they have a classified section in the rear for cars for sale or wanted to buy, and then they have parts. And every once in a while, I see a Columbia rear end for sale, but they're not cheap. They cost more than what my car costs brand new. And so, unfortunately, I don't have a Columbia rear end on it. I wish I did, but I don't.
Don, thank you so much. We really enjoyed it. That was
Great.
great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.